Good morning. We're in the middle of, we're on page 53 of the Hemshech Tofrei Tzadik Daled, 5694, which is parallels to Ayin Beis, pages 1147 through 1149. Where we began chapter 16, so in the middle of the page. We're talking about, to explain the ayin, the channel, the interface between Yesh Amiti and Yesh Nivra, between creator and creation, the producer and the product, breaks into two. So he went into a long discussion. Well, Ayin Beis was shorter, but here it's more at length. Rotzen, the idea of desire and will. That is a connector between the one who desires and the object that's being desired. So he says that generally there are two levels. He called them Rotzen Hanelam and Rotzen Hagale, a concealed desire and a revealed one, or Rotzen and Koyach Rotzen and Rotzen, the power of desire and desire. So chapter 15 was mostly focused on the first level, what he called Rotzen Mamish, a actual, revealed, expressive desire. And how does that manifest? He said in Yone, or he called it Muhuse de Mitziyuse. What does it entail? Hatoya v'hamshacha, an inclination and being drawn to pursue whatever it is that the desirer is desiring. That's level one. In discussing that, he referred, saying that that's not a desire that is due to a tam v'siba sichlis. It's not because of a logical reason. It's coming from within the individual. However, it's also not rotzen atzmi, which is even higher than kavana. Rotzen atzmi, which is like the love of parent to child and child to parent, which is a dogma for the love of God to the souls of Israel, there's no kavanah there. There's no intention. It's who you are. That's why you're drawn to them. And it makes no difference what their matzav is, what situation they're in, what quality they have of faculties, or he said even in benkach or benkach, no matter what situation they're in, even if chaz v'shalom, God forbid, they're not following God's will, so still, you cannot replace them. It's who you are. It's part of, you're my child, you will forever be my child, no matter what. That's a rotzen atzmi, says that's l'mayla mikavona. And then there's a rotzen that has a kavona, but it's not driven by a reason, by a tam and reason. That's rotzen gole, rotzen mamish. If hini yesh oid madrege berotzen, that's chapter 16. He says there's another level. And here he called it either koyach harotzen or rotzen hanelam, either the power of desire or a hidden desire. So we'll just read that line again that we were struggling to understand the exact flow. V'hu koydem lerotzen hagale. It's a rotzen that precedes the revealed desire that we've discussed before in the previous chapter, an expressed actual desire. Oi, the way I was reading it, and I still stand by that because I don't see a better way to read it, to be honest. Oi, it's preceding the rotzen of Mehusa Mitziyuse, is that it's an inclining, Hatoya v'amshacha la'isa adav v'shu reitze. So it's not yet in that state. What is it? Again, he repeats both.
Maybe it is like you said, it's missing a word. After oi harotzain, maybe something is missing. That looks like. Because the mahus mitziyusa, it's already a new thing.
Maybe I said that, but I'd rather interpret it than add a new word, because the Rebbe, who made footnotes, if you notice, he says in places that they may be missing a word. So the fact that the Rebbe doesn't say that here, so I'm wondering Maybe there isn't missing a word, or maybe the missing word is because of the printer, and the Rebbe did not, but the Rebbe's version before it was printed, maybe it wasn't missing. I would basically say, because the context is already a rotzen goli. Whereas when we're talking about a rotzen hanelem or koyach rotzen, hari'ena nimshach nafshi adayin. That's what he explained. The spirit of the person is not yet being drawn or pursuing. It's called a hachlota v'heskem. It's you've determined a resolve that this is worthy to desire. That's fine. That's what it is. It's an actual desire, but that's it. It's not the element of desire that's drawn to it. As I said, you could have this desire and it could sit there for years before you say, time to, to be drawn to it. Look, let me give an example. Many people talk about Mashiach. And we say, 6, 7 different brachas. We say it, and we all, let's say, I'm not talking about lip service. You say it with a kavanah, full intention, that's what you want. So it's clearly a rotzen is there for it. But I would say that Rebbe was not just a rotzen, it was actually pursuing it. You could want Mashiach and sincerely want it, but you know what? I want it, it's a good thing to have. It's worthy of my desire. But pursuing it, an actual, can't sleep at night because you need it, mistake, like he says. You're yearning, you're pining for it, and you're actively, you're active, that's a rotzen goli. Then the rotzen is in full active force. So these he's calling two different levels. I just gave an example. There's many other examples. Okay. So we're not talking about someone who doesn't want or doesn't care, is apathetic. There's a rotzen. But he says clearly, but to pine for it, to yearn for it, to, right. I'm sorry. So what do you have? It was determined and resolved. He in Eitzlatz Museh, in his core, by his core. That it's worthy and right, that he should desire this thing, that it should come to action. It's not just an abstract, it should come to action. But you don't have yet a state where there's an actual being drawn to it. That he's yearning it, he's lusting for it. It's only an agreement, or it's a resolve, or determination. These are all correct words. I know haskama sometimes is agreement, but here he means heskem as in a determination. Heskem, correct. It's correct to desire this. So based on the flow here, and you go back to the first two lines, it's clearly, that's, again, teichen advarim. I'm not talking about the actual words. The words now we have to figure out how to read it. But the teichen is clear, that this rotzen is kedem l'rotzen hagali, it precedes the rotzen hagali, or it precedes being drawn to it. I mean, the context is clearly that. That's not even a question mark. The question is how you read the oi. So I'm reading it like it would say, oi kedem harotzen dem husa mitzvuse hu atoyev amshach leisa adov. Is Ratzon Hagole the same thing as being drawn to it? So we discussed yesterday, it may be not exactly. It really comes down to whether Ratzon Hanelam is another word for Koyach HaRatzon, and Ratzon Hagole is another way of saying you're being drawn to it, or perhaps you could say the following. I'll just submit this as a suggestion. Ratzon Hagole and Ratzon Hanelam means that here it's a revealed desire, and here it's a concealed desire. And maybe it's not about being drawn or not drawn. It's just like revealed would mean it's apparent that you want it. And here it's more concealed that you want it. But I don't know if that really is what he's saying, because the second aspect, if you say Ratzon HaKoyach HaRatzon and Ratzon in a form of HaToyev Amshacha, there you could say the power of desire is meaning that it's a desire, but it's not active in pursuing something. It's not being drawn. And then the second state is when it's being drawn to it. I lean towards saying it's synonymous, that just two names for essentially the same level. Ratzon Hagoli and being drawn is one state, and Ratzon Hanelam and Koyach HaRatzon is a state before it's being drawn. I think. Maybe I'm wrong because it is two different. He's saying oi, but you can say it either way. I don't know if there's, because then you have to still ask the question, what's the difference between Goli and Nelam if it's not being drawn to it? That what? That you're aware of it or you're not aware of it? Is that what it means? Anyway, I'm just saying based on what I've read so far, I would have to go back to Ayin Beis chapter 65, 64 and 65, and maybe look more to see if there's more to this. I just pointing this out that the oi is either synonymous and just another name for it, or it's actually a subtly different type of distinction. But either way, it's clearly talking about two states of desire. One is more passive, if you wish, or more in the initial step. And the second one is an active, revealed, what they call Ratzon Mamash, you're actually pursuing and desiring and mistakik and yearning and pining. Okay.
To me, it sounds that you are right, except that these two words, Ratzon, I don't know what I don't know how to explain it.
Okay, but the Teichen for sure is correct. It's just a question of how the wording goes.
Yeah,
And it could be like when you want to marry a woman, you love a woman, but you're not thinking about it all the time. When you're not thinking about it, it's Helen, and when you get over the mind, oh, I got to propose to her, this and that.
Yeah, but propose is already, you can call that active. You're pursuing it. That's what means.
No, but I mean, mind, whatever it is, even if it's not.
Yeah, listen. You could end up saying that there's four levels here: Koyach HaRatzon, Ratzon Hanelam, Ratzon Hagolei, and the Ratzon that is actually pursuing. You could say that. I'm not denying that. There's not enough data.
no,
This conclusion.
This is clear. The Koyach HaRatzon and Ratzon Hanelam is one thing. It said, "V'hu hanikro Koyach HaRatzon or Ratzon Hanelam."
Okay. And Ratzon Hagolei, he also said, "Oy Ratzon Hagolei or Ratzon Hanelam." Again, fine.
Where is it saying that? Ratzon Hagolei.
Well, by Ratzon Hagolei, but look on the line 7th line from the top of page 52. Anyway, I think I said enough about this. I'm not gonna.
No, he's saying there that Berotzon yesh beis madregois, Ratzon Hanelam v'Ratzon Hagolei.
Oy.
Oy Koyach HaRatzon v'Ratzon.
Right.
So he's saying clearly that Koyach HaRatzon is Ratzon Hanelam.
And Ratzon Hagolei is Ratzon.
Ratzon Hagolei is Ratzon.
Fine. Yeah, but I just explained that you could also say that the Oy is not just another name for it. Maybe it's a subtly another level. Similar. It's similar. Anyway, no, don't be pointed, belabor it. I said what I said. That's all. Now he's going to continue to explain that even this higher Ratzon, the first level of Ratzon, which is only that a determination and resolve, but there's no active pursuit or no active being drawn toward it. He says it's still a Ratzon. We're not saying there's nothing there. That's what he's going to now explain what that is. So he says like this. V'heskem zeh, this determination or this resolve, hu la'achar sheneseir b'hadover, it's after the stimulation, after something was aroused. The Ratzon is clearly a Ratzon. He wants it. And says it's worthy to want. He's made a determination it's worthy to want. I should correct myself. Not yet pursuing it, but there is already because there's a state that even the heskim is not there. You could have a situation where someone says, "Do you want?" You said, "I don't know. I don't even know what this is," or "I didn't consider it." So even though it's not an active pursuit where you are drawn to the thing you want. Like he said, it's still essentially just a heskem v'hechlet that it's roi, it's worthy of wanting, but that's also after a hiserus. La'achar sheniseret ba'adavar, u'bo behechled gomer bli yeshuna. And he came to an act of behechled gomer, an absolute, determined bli yeshuna, that's unchangeable, unwavering. It's not an iffy situation. Yeah, maybe not. It's an absolute ratzon. It's just not in any active pursuit of the thing that you're desiring. Asher haheskem v'hechlet bo b'ratzon muchlat. This heskem v'hechlet, this determination and resolve, has now come b'ratzon muchlat. Muchlat means absolutely. It's necessary. Ulechein tzrichim lehizaher sheloi la'arev ratzon hamuchlat hazeh. And it's an interesting expression. In Ayin Beis, the expression here is what we learned, that this should not be confused with the ratzon hamuchal batzmusei that's before the hiserus. That there are things that are embedded and wired within us. He says, but here he's using the word l'chein tzrichim lihizaher. I want to just see if in Ayin Beis that language is used. Give me a second, 1 second. Perek Samachei. You want to know what page it is? And now I'm looking it up. I could tell you if you want the page number. I'm looking volume 1, chapter 65. Just want to see if the Lihizoyer is there. I think not, if I recall correctly. Yeah. It's the bottom of page 121, if you're interested in the volume 1 of Ayin Beis. Here he says, "Ve'ein ze inyan ratzon hamuchlat hamavur b'mokem acher." Here he's saying, "L'chein tzrichim lihizoyer." A very interesting expression, because usually you say this to take care means you got to protect. Here he's basically saying, and that's why we have to essentially be careful. Sholei la'arev ratzon hamuchlat hazeh im ratzon hamuchlat hamavur b'mokem acher. It's the Frierdiker Rebbe's original language. I never actually saw such a language on something like this. Like what's the Zahirus is almost like it's dangerous. It's a warning. He could say, L'chein tzarech l'chalik. No, you agree? I mean, it's a pretty strong word. I have to think about why he's using it so strongly. But basically, he's saying that what his father says, Ein ze inyan ratzon hamuchlat, he's like saying he's warning us not to confuse it with a different type of ratzon. So basically, it's almost like saying the following. I mean, this is how my initial interpretation is that if it wasn't a ratzon muchlat, if this first level of desire that you want it, but you're not actively pursuing it, was still in an ambiguous state, which means you want it, but maybe not. You have to think about it again. You could be you're leaning toward it, but you're not yet determined. He said, then you don't have to be concerned that is different than the ratzon hamuchlat batzmusei, because it's not muchlat, it's not absolute. The fact that this level, even though it's not an active pursuit, is because the heskim, you come to absolute decision. This is right, and this is worth desiring. That tells you that it's muchlat. That's why you need to be warned, and we need to be careful. I say careful is a better word. Be careful not to confuse it with a different ratzon hamuchlat. If it wasn't muchlat, you don't have to distinguish. It's not muchlat. It's still not a absolute desire. So I would say like this: it's almost like saying that's why my father, the Rebbe Rashab, has to distinguish, to take care, to be careful, not to confuse it with a different level of ratzon hamuchlat. And what is that level? Actually, in Ayin Beis that we learned, he also mentioned that. And what is that level? That's ratzon hamuchlat hamavur b'makom acher shehu b'li hiserus klal. So he's moving now to another ratzon. Ratzon hamuchlat that explained elsewhere. The elsewhere I mentioned was the Rosh Hashanah Maimorim of Tofrei Samach Gimel, and the Frierdiker Rebbe has the equivalent of that in Tov Shin Gimel. So he speaks there about ratzon hamuchlat batzmusei, and he says that's a ratzon b'lo hiserus klal. There's no arousal, there's no awakening. It's just there. It sounds very much like the ratzon atzmi we learned earlier on the top of this page and bottom of last page, but maybe not. I'm not positive. Sounds like it. We'll see. Maybe he'll say the Ratzon HaMuchel Haba Blik Timasei Seiris. This higher level of Ratzon HaMuchel, meaning, and Ratzon HaMuchel means a Ratzon that's not that you came to a conclusion and a resolve and termination. Ratzon HaMuchel Batzmusei means it's embedded in who you are. It's an absolute part of who you are, that desire. He says that which comes Blik Timasei Seiris, without the preface, without a earlier awakening. In other words, you don't have to stimulate it. It's there. That Ratzon HaMuchel is there in the core of the soul. Desires, absolute desires, due to the etzem, because who you are, that's compels these desires. Desires that doesn't require and is not in a state of Sederus. He did not, nothing was stimulated. It's just there in the Etzem HaNefesh. And it's even possible, it's possible that forever, it will never be stimulated. It will always just sit there, part of who your Etzem is.
Yechoiles.
I would not use the word Yechelis if they don't use Yechelis. No, this is not Yechelis because Yechelis is higher than Ratzon.
Can you give us an example? Is it like somebody, like they said to get a house, but it never comes up in his whole life?
Yeah, he lives his whole life and he never finds a home. He never goes, never builds a home. A person, Ein Adam B'Loi Isha, he never gets married. You could have things like that are fundamental to you. Like, for example, let's say the natural desire of having children, and you never end up having children, God forbid. These are examples.
I think it's worse than that. I think you don't even have it in mind particularly. I think that's what it's referring to. You never have.
Right, exactly. No.
This says you never found the patterns you never even thought of having.
Ratzon HaMuchel Batzmusei means that there are things that are part of who you are, and they could come into stimulation, they could be aroused, and they could ultimately be actualized. He didn't say they can be. He's saying, but it precedes his Sederus. It's there before before it gets ignited, so to speak. There's what we're talking about till now is the process of a Ratzon, where you've come through a process, a Sederus, you come to determine that this and this thing is worthy of you wanting it. You want it. Second stage, you actually pursue it. He's going back a step now, that there are things inside embedded in the etzem of the nefesh that's called Ratzon HaMuchlet. It's a different level of Ratzon HaMuchlet than the one that comes through a stimulation. This one is just embedded, it's part of your wiring. And it's possible, and therefore it's not even, it's not dependent on or in any way impacted by being conscious of it and essentially stimulated or aroused or awakened or inspired. Doesn't need to be inspired. That's a good word too. It's there, and it's possible it will never emerge. That's all he's saying.
The first Ratzon HaMuchlet is the Ratzon Atzmi, right?
I didn't say that. I said it sounds like the Ratzon Atzmi on the top of the page, and it's possible it is, but he doesn't say it.
I'm not asking this. I'm asking if this Ratzon HaMuchlet, the first level, is part of the Atzmi.
Why don't we just use the words? I like to be true to the words of the Rebbe. The words he uses are like this. That's the words he's using. Is the Ratzon in the etzem HaNefesh mitzad ha'etzem. The core soul has embedded in it, in its wiring, these sayings. That's what he's saying. Let's continue reading. These are from the things that are absolutes, by etzem mitzad ha'etzem. They're absolutes in the etzem, due to the etzem. I would not call it the etzem. It's a Ratzon in the etzem, due to the etzem. The examples would be home and wife, based on what the Chazal say. Ein Adam B'Loi. Those would be examples. and they could remain dormant forever. They can come into a stimulation that you actually are aware and never actualize it because you didn't pursue it. And then they can come into full pursuit and you actually actualize it. So there are three scenarios. It remains Ratzon HaMuchlet Be'etzem, or Ratzon HaMuchlet in a Yisraelus. So it's absolutely, I want this. And then you actually pursue and you're drawn and you're mistaken to it and make sure it happens. So if that's what he explains in Samach Gimel and Tovshin Gimel, Tofrei Samach Gimel and Tovshin Gimel, that there's these three levels. Look, you don't need, I'm sure you're thinking about this because I already explained it this way. This is all coming to help us understand some way, some semblance, some sense of how God's energy evolves in the process of creation. And remember, why do you need all these levels? Because you want things to understand them in the deepest level in the source, how they are in the etzem. And then you want to see how it evolves into becoming more relationship with actualization. And you don't want to skip steps. So the more steps Chassidus can give us, the more stepping stones we have to connect to it, both in understanding it and retracing the steps as we unite with godliness. So that's really the overarching point of all of this. This isn't just splitting hairs and trying to figure out a level after level. It's really all about Avodah, how we can connect to each one of these levels. Like just to give a small example, we know that after Matan Torah, right, 39, we're now in this period that 39 days later they built the golden calf. Comes Shavasa B'Tammuz, Moshe comes down from the mountain. He sees this tragedy. He breaks the tablets. He reprimands the Jews. He marches back up and says to Hashem, I need you to forgive the people. Okay, we know that doesn't come easy. Day after day. These days, Moshe is up on the mountain the second time after receiving the Torah the first time. He will come down to Chodesh Elul and he's not been rewarded. No, he did not get forgiveness. Goes back up a third time. Spends till Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur he comes back down. Salachti kidvarecha. We say Yom Kippur the night. I have forgiven them as you've spoken, and God finally, so to speak, gives in and forgives the Jewish people. Yom Kippurim, Luchas Shnias, we get the second tablets, and forever this is the holiest day of the year. Forgiveness, Yom Tshuva, Kapora, and so on. Slichas Avenas. What happened here in the context of what we're talking here? I'll show you. There's a Ratzon Atzmi, we called it before, the Eibishter wants Neshamas Yisrael. And that is not subject to anything. It's a fundamental connection like a parent and a child. Okay. But then the child did things that were really big crimes. Betrayal of God. Building a golden calf. Moshe is trying to invoke and reconnect to the Ratzon Atzmi, which sounds like the Ratzon HaMuchlet a bit. Maybe, I'm not positive it is, it may be higher. But regarding our discussion, it doesn't really make a difference. And that Ratzon HaMuchlet can remain dormant. But Moshe wants to stimulate it because he wants to reconnect. He wants Hashem to forgive the people. He wants them to give the luchas. He wants them to give the luchas shniyas. So you need to take, so the Ratzon HaMuchlet, you sometimes need, I'm talking Avodah, when do you access it? When all else fails, you need to go to the Ratzon HaMuchlet. When things are going well and you have a good relationship with your spouse or with your children or between us and God, then even though there's a Ratzon HaMuchlet behind the scenes, but then there's an active relationship. There's a Ratzon Goli, meaning, there's a Ratzon Nelam or Kech Ratzon where there's an active, there's a Ratzon that's very strongly there, a resolve. Then there's the level when it's activated. My point is, each of these three levels are not just three abstract levels, and they just, as I said, we're not splitting hairs. They're actually three levels of Elokus, basically. There's the Etzem of Inyan, of Mitzad Atzmusei, the Ratzon HaMuchlet. There's the Ratzon that has become conscious, but it is not yet in any active mode. So it's a resolve, an absolute determination, as he's now going to distinguish between the first two. And then there's a Ratzon Goli, or what he called Ratzon, where the Ratzon is actually Hatoyev Amshacha, is being drawn and acting. It's active and pursuing that which it desires, that it pine, that that it yearns and pines for.
We're trying to connect to the Eibishter's Ratzon HaMochut. He desires to have a dear Taktonim and marrying Klal Yisrael v'chulu.
Dear B'tachtenim, and I would not bring into yet here, because that may be higher than the Ratzon HaMuchlat. I would say it is. I would say right now, we're trying to connect on all levels, not one level. I'm pointing out that each level has a particular uniqueness. When you connect with godly Ratzon HaGolei, how he's actively pursuing and connecting with us, it's a very valuable connection. But there's still more behind the scenes, and even higher and higher. And even the Ratzon HaMuchlat is not Atzmus yet. Remember that. That's not even Eir Atzmi. The Ratzonos themselves are within Eir. I'm just explaining that there's implications and significance to these levels. They're not just levels. There's a reason that they're there. And at different times, you need to connect to each one in its own way. We'll talk about it some more. I just wanted to give making it a little more relevant to our lives, not just, as I said, abstract levels. Okay. So where are we? Okay, so we determine now there's a we need to be careful not to confuse this Ratzon HaMuchlat, which we call Koyach HaRatzon, Ratzon HaNelam, which is an absolute resolve. That's why you need to make careful not to confuse it with the Ratzon HaMuchlat Batzmusei. That's Koydemei Seiris. That's before anything that's stimulated or any type of arousal at all. And now he's going to make that distinction. So he just finished saying these are Ratzon HaMuchlat, these are hardwired in your etzem and mitzad atzem. Aval haratzon hamuchlat hamavur kan. Now this is the distinction. But the ratzon hamuchlat we're talking about here is a different one. We're not talking about the hardwired in the etzem. That is not subject to inspiration or stimulation. The ratzon hamuchlat, the absolute desire and resolve that we're talking about, that's explained here. Hu shabala acher shekvar neseired ba'hadover. This is a ratzon that comes after he's already inspired and stimulated and aroused for this, whatever it is that he's desiring. And he already had a shakavataria, which means he had debate within himself. Yes or no, is it worthy, not worthy? If it's worthy to be desired, this thing that we're talking about, imlav, or not. In other words, there was a stage where he was weighing and he's not come to a determination yet. So there's an active process going on. It's not an active pursuit, but it's an active process of determining, is it worthy or not worthy to be desired? And after this debate, so to speak, this discussion, this weighing all the pros and cons, he comes to a determination that it's worthy to desire. Okay, let's stop for a moment. This is the Ayin Beis. The Frierdiker Rebbe is now going to come and basically try to qualify something here, because Shaka V'Tarya sounds like a logical process. And we just said earlier, remember, that this Ratzon is not subject to logic and Tam. So he's going to explain what means Shaka V'Tarya. What does this mean when it says Shaka V'Tarya, generally speaking, is like a brainstorm. Shaka V'Tarya, we weigh. Shekel, that comes from the word. Shaka V'Tarya comes from weighing this, a pro, a con, an argument.
A deliberation.
Yeah, deliberation, that's a good word, yeah. Counter-argument, counter-argument, back and forth. Shaka V'Tarya. And then you come to Achlota. It's like Rabbanim sitting in a dinter. They will then sit and discuss it all. Deliberate. Good word. Very good. Yeah. So he's going to say. So let's first make the distinction. It's not the Ratzon HaMuchlat Batzmusei. That's wired in. That has nothing to do with any Shaka V'Tarya. There's no discussion. There's no deliberation. There's no need for inspiration. There's no stimulation at all. It's there. It's sitting there, and it could also never emerge. What we're talking about here is already an active process, a process that someone goes through to determine that this is what they want. and then they come to the resolve, yes. So now he's going to explain what means shaka v'tarya then. He says, "V'shaka v'tarya zu hu ba'rotzen atzmei." This deliberation is in the desire itself. Ki klolos inyan shaka v'tarya, because the general idea of a deliberation, hu b'seichel b'chlal. It's in generally it's in seichel. Who weighs? When you say, "Give me options," and you start considering and deliberating what's right, what's wrong, where is that taking place? That's in seichel. In general, that's the seichel process. That's where you use your mind. You ask questions. You say, here are the pros, here are the cons, here are the pros and the cons and the other option. You're reviewing it. And specifically in the moyach of bina, because chokhmah is still just a spark, it's just a nakuda. Bina is where you try to comprehend and go through all the details. You basically pick it apart. Okay, he's going now through a whole discussion what shaka v'tari is, and he's going to come back to explain what means shaka v'tari here, barotzen. So just, again, this is classic Frierdiker Rebbe. He's analyzing and probing and evaluating and dissecting all the details. So he says like this. And now he's going to explain what this means. Every concept, muskel means any conception, and musig, anything that's understandable. Muskel seichel is usually, chachma is muskel, and musig is usually bina. So any concept, any intellectual concept, and musig, an idea if you wish. Yesh bo shloisha inyanim. It has three things. Chemer, tzura, v'tikun. Remember, I pointed out a number of times that the Frierdiker Rebbe is a big classifier of things. He puts things into categories. Remember, we learned Mohusa Metzias, Metzias Mohus, Mohusa Metzias. There's there's Mohusha B'Mohus, Metzias Mohus, Mohusha Metzias, Metzias HaMetzias. Many places, remember he spoke about he said there's three things. Metzias HaEr, Kiyum HaEr, and Gilui HaEr. Frierdiker Rebbe is very categorizes a lot. So he's saying in every muskel and musug, there's three things: chemer, tzura, v'tikun. You may remember these three back in the early pages of Ayin Beis. He spoke about chemer, tzura, and tikun. Is he going to explain it, or should I explain it? Let's see. Okay. Chemer, tzura, tikun means the following. It's usually bria, Yitzira Asiya is another word for Chemer Tzura Tikun. Sometimes Nakuda Kav Shetach. But let's stick to Chemer means raw matter. Tzura means it's shaped, and Tikun means it's the finished product that's completely polished and ready to go. So if you take, let's say you want to produce a diamond ring, a diamond. So diamond is a diamond in the rough, Chemer. Tzura is where you make it into a shaped form. And tikkun is when you finish the whole thing. That's what tikkun means. Tikkun doesn't mean just repair. It also means beautifying. It means like finished product. So chemer, tzura, tikkun are the three levels. In bria, you say it's a chemer. You have a bria, a raw piece of clay. In yetzira, tzura, it gives it shape. And asiya comes the tikkun where it comes full dimensional product. That's a general explanation in simple English. Let's see how he's going to apply it here. So he's saying in seichel and musig, in muskel and musig, there are these three things. Chemer, tzura, tikun. Haboyim b'seder gedima v'ichur. And these three come in an order of a procession, a hierarchy. One comes before the other. A progression, you could say also, a progression. The efshel liyas hatikun. Shu hashichlol b'lei kedimas hatzura. Shu habinyan. Yeah. You can't go to tikkun, the third stage. Shichlol means, how do you translate shichlol? A completeness. How would you translate shichlol? I think so. Complete rounded picture, basically. Complete rounded product. A finished product. Shichlol also means, I believe, Rab Shlomo, how would you translate shichlo? Trying to think of the right word.
Improvement.
Perfection.
Perfection is probably the right word, perfection. I'm looking at translate. Let me see how it's translated here in English. Give me a second. I don't know. Yeah, in here they translate improvement, but I think it's basically the final polishing. You know, you finish a product, you shape it right, and then you go back and say, let me polish it, let me refine it, let me zuputzen is a word. That tikkun, sometimes tikkun is referred to jewelry. It's like an ornament, but it's basically beautifying and finishing that you say, now it's a finished product. You see this all the time.
Polishing the buttons.
It's in a major way. It's not only a little bit to beautify.
Yeah, no. It's the right. You're not ready to give it away. You see this in all production. A joke comes to mind, but I don't know if I should say it. It's a little off color. So let's stay away from it since this is a public forum. Okay.
This is like the end product of Seichel evaluating the rotzas to give over the joke.
Okay. So he's saying like this: you can't come to Shichlel, to the complete perfect product, without first having a binyan v'tzura. I'm sorry. Shu lik demis hatzura shu habinyan. You can't polish and finish. When I say polish, I don't just mean polish. I mean finish, refine, complete, perfect. You can't do that if you don't first have a shaped form, which is the binyan, which is the structure of it. Asher boyi hashichlul. So someone's going to say, you know what? Let's say you have three different stages in the assembly line of taking a diamond in the rough, or for that matter, a piece of clay and turning it into a beautiful pot. The first step is the one that, let's say, mines the diamond. And he gives you, here's a diamond in the rough, or gives you the raw clay. Fine. That's the chaymer. Then someone comes and an expert starts knowing how to reshape it, gets rid of the garbage and starts shaping it into a beautiful, now you see a beautiful diamond. They made it into a beautiful thing. Then comes the third stage, that the one who cleans it and polishes it and sharpens the edges and makes sure it's full dimensional, ready to go to the customer. So someone's going to say, the third guy comes to work and they'll say, you only have a chaymer, you don't have a shape. Go ahead, fix it up. He said, no, I first need someone to make it into shape that I can edit it. It's like in a way, it's almost like in writing you have this. You have the writing, you write the first draft, it's just the raw form. Then someone comes and shapes it into chapters and so on. And the final editor comes and polishes it, the prose, makes it really perfect. Now it's ready to go publish. So the last editor can't do it until the second one turned it into something. You can ask him to edit something that is still in raw form, that's not been even turned into chapters. Basically, just giving a few examples. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. So the tzura makes the binyan. You can't have shichlel. Asher boyi hashichlel. Once you have the shaped structure, now you can come and perfect and turn it into what the final product. And the same thing with step one and step two. Step two and step one. The efshali is binyan v'tzura. You can't have a structure and a shape. Im lo yugdam hachaymer. If you didn't first have raw material. So that's the order. Chaymer tzura tikkun. Kdima v'ichur. That's the first thing the Frierdiker Rebbe says. Then he goes on. The Bechlal Lusan, in general, these are the Gimel Meichin Chabad. These are the three stages, the three levels of the mind. Chochma Bina Das. The Nekudas HaSkola, see he uses the word HaSkola, the Chochma, the pure concept, the point, or the spark of Haskola of Chochma, of the idea, of the concept. Hu HaChemer HaYusedi, L'chol Binyan HaMuskul VaHasoga. That's the Chemer HaYusedi. If you don't have a spark of an idea to begin with, The process has not begun. So the first thing is you need essentially a raw central point. That's like when someone comes up with a brainstorm. I have an idea, but the idea is not shaped yet. It's not formed. It's not turned into a viable plan. It's an idea. It's exactly that. It's an unshaped and unformed concept. It's very intense, and it's the beginning of the process. Without that, you can't do anything else. But now you need to flesh it out. So he says it's the Chemer HaYesedi. It's the Chemer HaYesedi. Chemer HaYesedi here means the essential element or the fundamental element of the Chol Binyan HaMuskal VaHasaga, to the whole structure of understanding and comprehension. So the whole idea, everything starts with a spark, a point of departure. Ubina, what's the role of Bina? Bina hua esed surah ba'nakuda. It creates shape in that point. When you take a point, a dot is only a dot. It can go in many different directions. Bina expands and broadens it and turns it into a shaped idea. But and how does it do so? Bina does it by in the way through the fact that shemafa'eres, that it explains. Umazberes, it expounds upon. Umazberes, and explains. Protim ba'nakuda de chochma. Details in this spark or in this nakuda, this point of chochma. I'll just use an example from what we've been learning. We've learned that atzmi, bilti mispashet, atzmus, is not subject to any extension, expression, and definition. That's a nakuda that the mind can understand, listens. And now Bina will come and break it down and say, one second, what does that mean exactly? And we'll break it down into details. I know I'm using seichel on atzmi, and maybe that's not the wise thing to do, but the way we're understanding atzmus, that's the way we go through it. So any process of intelligent process begins with a statement. Whatever that statement is, ein dover eishes atzmei, nothing can create itself. Haklal godel ma'achelik, the whole is greater than the part. These are statements, and Bina elaborates and expounds upon and explains the details of it in the Nukud of Chachma. V'chol prat bo b'riboy sfaris. And every detail comes with a numerous amount of theories. U'b'chol svara, and every theory, yesh ponim neitus lekan, u'ponim neitus lekan canal. In every theory, there are reasons and explanations that there are inclinations that go this direction and others go in a different direction. In other words, a svara is not just one approach. So besides the fact there are many theories in it, each theory has many ways, it has different directions that it leads you to. It can lead you in one place, or it can lead you to another direction. Like we say, Shivim Ponim L'Teira. The Torah has 70 faces. It means 70 facets. There's 70 ways to explain something, and it could be more lenient, more severe, more this way, more that way. All this is Bina. Canal. Oh, where was canal? That's a long time ago. I don't remember where the canal is even. I have to look it up. That must be very, very. Oh, you know where that is? That's all the way in the beginning. You know where that is? Actually, you know where that is? That's in Das. Here. Page 5. Yeah. Now I remember. It was so early. It was right in the beginning with Das Alin and Das Tachten. He said that. And he explained it with examples. Page 5, if you want to look it up. Okay. And that's why with the intellect of Bina, the mind of Bina, remember you actually call them Gimel Moichin. It's like almost saying the right brain, the left brain, and the center brain. But it's like three, it's not just 3 dimensions of intelligence, it's considered like 3 Moichin, 3 different facets of intellect. So he says, and that's why with the intellect of Bina, the facet of Bina, understanding, now he's going back. That's why that's the place for Shakal V'Tarya, for deliberation. Remember, he said that main Shakal V'Tarya is an intelligence, and specifically in Bina. All this was leading up, that's where Bina, why Bina? So he says now Shakal V'Tarya, v'hu b'beis inyanim. He's dissecting it further. There's two aspects, there's two elements to the Shakal V'Tarya, the deliberation in Bina. Ha'echad, the first is ba'mitis ha'seichel atzmei. The first deliberation is in the resonating truth of the idea. The lepomim hari b'ashkofa reshena, because at times, at first glance, ostensibly, at first glance, nira da'seichel amiti. It appears that this is a true idea. You know, someone shares an idea, a thought, a concept. Is it real or not real? Is it true or not true? It could be also worthless. So he says there are times that initially, first glance, it appears like a true resonating idea, that it's a true idea. Seichlu amiti. Next page, V'rak achre, page 54. Iyune heitev be'etzem ha'seichel shel hasvara, only after further analysis and further immersion in and hative, not just further, a solid type of immersion and review, be'etzem ha'seichel, the core idea, shel hasvara, of this theory, then he sees that the seichel mitzad, meaning on its own, this idea is not real, is not true. So ostensibly it seemed true, and further analysis it was not. V'hu hanikra, and this is what's called akruma svara. You ever hear someone say it's akruma svara?
That
Like
makes
someone
it
comes
very
up-
clear.
Huh?
These few words makes the whole idea clear.
Yeah. Akruma means crooked. Akruma svara means it's like a crooked idea. It's not a kruma svara is not like he's not even saying it's a lie. It's not sheker. It's just krum. It's not. How do you say krum? Crooked is the literal word, but it means kruma means it's not straight thinking. It's like a kruma cup. Sometimes you say he has a kruma cup. He thinks not in a straight way, like some type of some idiosyncratic fashion. Okay, so that's the first thing of Shakal V'Tarya. You're deliberating to determine, is it emes or not emes? So very often someone will say something to you. Let's say you have a dilemma and they come to you, you have a dilemma, you come to someone and they say to you, I think this and this is the way to approach it. It sounds right. Then you go back to deliberate on it and you come back and say, no, this is not right. That's called Shakal V'Tarya, the first element of it. That you're deliberating to determine whether it's an accurate theory, it's an accurate idea. Ayin Beis, and the second element of Shakal V'Tarya, second inyan in a deliberation is hu Ayin Beis shayches seichel zeh l'svara zu.
Relevant.
Okay, I'll tell you what it means. He's saying like this. It's the Shakal V'Tarya, the deliberation is that whether this theory that is being posited now, its relationship with the original point of Chochmah. So Chochmah could be a concept, but it's just a Nakuda. Now you're trying to understand it, and there are different ways to understand it. So different theories are being explained. You know, let's just speak about the Nakuda of Chochmah. Let's say the first time someone recognized that when you take an object, it falls to the ground. There were different theories for that. Newton came up with a theory called gravity. It's a theory. The question is this theory connected to the original? Actually, this is not a good example. No, I thought it would work. Sorry. I mean, it works a little. I wanted to point out, does this theory related to the actual initial concept? But I don't know if it works well here, because what's the initial concept? So let's strike that. Sorry about that. Let's find something else. I'm trying to find something, a Nakuda of Chochmah, Well, in the Gemara, you find this all the time. Somebody makes a statement, and then the students are trying to understand what's the reasoning behind it. What's the svara behind it? And they say this svara, and then this one says this svara, and so on. So the second level of shakavatari is determining the shaykhs of the seichel to the svara. He's going to give an example. Let's read inside. You'll see. Because the svara is bina, the seichel is chachma. Says the lapamim at times yocheli is da seichel mitzadatz mehu amiti. Here we're not wondering whether it's real. You've already determined that it's true. So there are times the seichel on its own is amiti, who seichel yafa, as opposed to akruma svara. It's a seichel yafa. It's a nice idea. The idea is nice and correct. But your theory of explaining it is not that idea has no shaykhs to what you're saying. Very often someone will say, let me explain an idea, and you say, the idea is right, but what you're saying and explaining it doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound like you're giving a nice theory, but it's not related to the original concept. And this second point, and this is the deliberation and the back and forth in Bina, to weigh, is the svara actually connected to the idea that is coming to explain?
It's talking about both of them, no? About amitis seichel and about the shaykhs.
He said Beis in Yonim. If you go back to the second line from the bottom last page, he says the shakavatari hu bebeis in Yonim. One inyan is determining whether it's true. Initially, it could seem so, and then you determine it's not. Va'beis is even if it's true, you're determining whether the svara that's being used to explain it applies. Like very often in the Gemara, I'm trying to find one example that comes to mind, where they're trying to explain something a Tana said, and then and the guy gives an explanation, an Amira, or a student, and then someone else comes and says, no, your explanation is a good explanation, but it's not connected. It does not relate to this situation that to his initial point, because his initial point has a different circumstance or something like that. I'll find an example. Nothing comes to mind right now, but I'm sure there is. I made the mixes. Yeah. I had a thought, but it's not a good, I don't have a. And very often you'll even find the Gemara says that the theory you're trying to explain it is not a good enough reason. So the only thing we know is that's how it is. That's Exeris HaKosov. The Torah says this is what you have to do. And your svara is not good enough to explain why. So we don't go with your svara. Basically, those are the two elements in Shakavatanya. Uba b'shichlil, and then now it comes in its complete version. After the Shakavatanya of Bina, which is the Tzura, and you've come to determination, you've come to clarification that this is a true idea, and the Svara fits the idea. Then it comes all the complete picture. The third moyach, hamishachlel umachlit, that completes, finishes, and determines. Because Bina, at the end of the day, goes through the whole process of creating now the shape and form. But now you need the final editor, so to speak, the final step in the intellectual process. Hamishachel includes them all, takes the whole thing, and machlit. And when it comes to a determination, the kan inyan hashakvitaria hu beratzon gufa. Aha. 1 second. Ooh. And now the shakvitaria is nerotzon itself. You know what? Since it's already late, I'm going to stop here because we have to read it and understand it and analyze it. And I'll leave it for Sunday.
Yashkoich, have a good Shabbos.
It looks to me like the Shakvatai is in Das, but it's coming following Seichel. Okay, I got to look into this a little more. Let's stop here, top of page 54. We'll continue on Sunday at 10 a.m. Yeah, everyone have a very good, be well.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Shabbos. Thanks.
Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Good
Thank you.
Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Okay. Be well, everybody.
You too.
They do.